It's a good time for the Vikings to have a bye because TJ Hockenson is coming back and soon. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. I appreciate my hashtag everydayers so very much. If you're new here, hello, welcome in. You can find the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Just search it out on whatever app you use to listen to your favorite shows. You can also find this podcast on YouTube or on Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today on the show, I have not really talked a lot about the timeline that we've been going through with TJ Hockenson. Other stuff has been happening. The Vikings are 5-0. Crazy stuff's going down. Sam Darnold's taking the nation by storm. But meanwhile, quietly in the background on the other field, doing rehab, has been TJ Hockenson. Hockenson is very close. Very close. His recovery is nearly complete. His practice window is open. That happened last week. I did not mention it here on the show because I was too busy talking about a Packers win, but that sort of snuck in I think it was like weekend news, that the 21-day practice window has opened, which means that the very latest that TJ Hockenson can join the team would be, I believe, the game after the Thursday night Rams game. That would be November 3rd at home against the Colts. So at worst, based on that math, 2 more games without Hockenson, at worst. Unless he suffers some kind of setback and he has to go back onto IR, which would end his season. So that means that the texture of the Vikings offense is about to change a lot more than you might realize. So I want to do a little review on what TJ Hockenson means to the Vikings offense. If you want a video breakdown of this, I did one last year before he got hurt on my Patreon page, patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. You can go watch it for free. Just search out Hockenson on the page. You'll find a couple things about it, but it's one from, I believe, from the Saints game. And you can kind of see examples of what I'm talking about here. But the way that the Vikings designed the offense, the first offseason, they had Hockenson in the building, right? Like Hockenson in 2022 was there. I mean, he did receiving things, but he basically did what the Vikings were expecting Irv Smith to do that year. And then he kind of never took that step. He got hurt and stuff. That was a little bit of a downfield role, kind of a move tight end deal. And then they would have, I think it was Ben Ellefson would be the blocker. Like they would kind of switch their tight ends for different jobs. And then Hockenson could come in and do all of those jobs, but they had installed an offense with this idea of this downfield tight end as part of the passing. And he could do that job. He could run those routes. And maybe the thing that Hockenson is the best at is separating. That's the thing I like the most about what he does, is how he can get just enough separation. You're not going to see a lot of tight ends like juke a linebacker out of their shoes. I think he has done that a couple times, but that's not like really what you're expecting from a tight end. For a tight end, true separation is getting onto the correct hip and stacking up that defender, whether it's like a nickel corner or a linebacker, a safety or whatever, and then being in a position where you can use your body to box out for the catch. That's what you really need from a tight end when it comes to route running, right? It's a different standard, and it's one that Hockenson was able to reach, not in a spectacular or flashy fashion, but very consistently. He could do that every rep. That's what was exciting. And it meant you could really pop off for a lot of yards. It made Hockenson, because you knew you could rely on him getting to this spot and stacking up the defender in some way that would make it so that spot was open. Because you knew that, you're not going to ask him to run a post route, right? But you might ask him to run a 15-yard basic. Or the big one that the Vikings asked him to run was Y choice. Some people will call it Y delay because it's sort of a delayed choice because it's a tight end, so it's a slower player. But Y choice works just like regular choice. In the Vikings offense, and in the Rams offense, and in the Packers offense, and in the Bengals offense, and in the Jets, and I think every year offense, I would be very surprised to see if there's an NFL offense that doesn't rely on choice. So in NFL offenses, choice is one of their favorite ways to get a quick 5 or 6. So whether it's 3rd and 4 or 1st and 10, you want your quick 5 or 6, right? It's a great 2nd and 10 call, very versatile thing that you can go to over and over and over again and sort of try to keep yourself ahead of the chains. Choice is always going to be paired with a clear. That's how part of how you can tell when it's choice is that it will be paired with a clear on the outside. So you'll have the slot run the choice, or tight end from the wing position, or whoever that is. Sometimes it's a halfback or whatever. But the 2, call it the 2, the second innermost receiver, will run choice. He'll either break away from leverage if it's man, or he'll sit down in a zone. And the quarterback needs to read it the same. And if those 2 guys are on the same page about that, it is incredibly difficult to defend. You essentially have to have 2 defenders vice down on that choice route to win it. And then choice will be paired. And it's really difficult to do that, by the way, because in some coverage structures, the guy who would be vicing down on that choice has to run with the clear out. That's what the clear out is for. But let's say you do get those 2 guys vicing down on it. It would have to be like a cover 3 structure or a cover 2 structure, I guess. But whatever that is, you're usually going to be asking a linebacker from the other side of the ball to help, or a linebacker who's supposed to be over the ball to help, depending on what kind of structure you're in. And it's going to open up space on that other side. So let's say you are in a formation with 2 wide receivers on either side. You've got and one of them is a tight end, right? But call them both slots, like the way that they would line up, just to keep it simple in your head. And you're on choice on one side. And you have those 2 defenders vice down on that choice. That will make it so that choice doesn't work, right? If it's that zone, that receiver will run to the spot, and you squeeze that spot, you take choice away. But to do that, you have to widen out a different space. So you can basically pair choice with like any horizontal stretch concept and get yards. Choice return is a very, very popular one where you just have that kind of backwards whip route or return route that goes across. And because it looks a lot like stick when you run a return, this is the reason you run a return, by the way. And I'm a big JT O'Sullivan fan. He hates these return routes. He doesn't get them. Here's the vision, okay? JT, Locked On Vikings listener, clearly you listen to my podcast. That's something that I'm sure he does. But so here's the point of a return route is that it starts and looks like stick. And so hopefully you get people to drive down and then you break away from them. That's like the whole point of it. It takes a while to do it, and that's why he doesn't like it. It's like kind of a clunky route that takes a long time to run, and he doesn't like giving it to like slow tight ends. But Hockenson can run that return pretty quickly, and it can bring that concept back into the fold. The Vikings have not run much choice this year, at least not to my eye. They have not really been living in it. That is like one of their favorite ways to get a quick ball in Justin Jefferson's hands. And they'll use TJ Hockenson as the focal point on that as well, especially on 3rd down. Because when you run Y choice with the tight end, against certain zones, or if you ever break that route in against man leverage, you're taught to actually deepen it pretty dramatically so that the quarterback can layer it up and over a linebacker that might be driving and trying to break that thing up. And that means that it actually can be a 9, 10, 11-yard play if you hit it and can get you out of a 3rd and long. That happened last year with Hockenson, like a few times, like a lot of times. It was actually maybe their favorite 3rd and long play because it actually had a chance to convert. So there are a lot of little things in the passing game that TJ Hockenson does, not to mention prowess as a blocker, strong side zone being a much more attractive option, pairing him with Josh Oliver, double teaming an edge rusher with that, very sexy option. And also being able to then run a little bit more of that zone so you can boot a little bit more off of it. Right now, the Vikings' best run play is duo. And I don't think that's going to change with TJ Hockenson because part of having a little bit more Josh Oliver in your offense means that you can run the run play. That's the famous weakness of it, is that a tight end has to one-on-one with an edge rusher, but Josh Oliver can do that. And then you get 2 double teams on the inside, and those double teams have been absolutely humming. Part of that is Ed Ingram and Garrett Bradbury being really, really good at that part. As mad as you are about pass protection, they are unbelievable at doubles this year. And I like climbing to the right backers, especially on duo. But the other part of it is Aaron Jones. And there are 2 other players coming off of injury over the course of this bye week, we would hope, one of which is Aaron Jones, and the other one might change what's going on the offensive line as well. So I do want to get into that. And then if we have some time, I maybe want to do a quick over-under about the bye week, look at some stuff around the league because we've got time to. Why not? Let's have some fun. That'll be next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5 APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Today's episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best way to play daily fantasy football. I have been having so much fun with PrizePicks this year, and I am pretty significantly up on the year because PrizePicks' more than less than amounts have been absolutely buck wild and all over the place. So I've actually been able to find a little bit of success with some regularity on PrizePicks, which is saying something for me. So if you want to get in on that, you can go to PrizePicks. They've got all kinds of promos going on all the time. All you got to do is just pick 2 to 6 of your favorite players to put in your lineup and predict whether or not they'll do better or worse than their PrizePicks projection. Turn in your lineup. You can win up to 100 times your money. So if you think Justin Jefferson will get more than or less than 83.5 yards when he plays the Lions, that kind of stuff. So you can get all of that if you go download the PrizePicks app. And if you use code LOCKEDONNFL, you can get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's LOCKEDONNFL, all one word, on the PrizePicks app to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. With any luck, TJ Hockenson will come off of true IR and be part of the active roster when the Vikings play the Lions on the other side of the bye week. If not, maybe the Rams game, and if not, then definitely the Colts game afterwards. The other players coming from injury, hopefully eventually, will be Aaron Jones, who has a hip injury. It's a hip flexor injury. He has been described as week to week, and the general tone has been pretty optimistic. So I don't really know if that means that they can expect him back for the Lions game, but it's not like a season ender, we got to go start trading for guys kind of thing. I think people are panicking a little bit too much with that before we even knew the extent of Aaron Jones' injury, and probably overreacting to a poor Ty Chandler game where he very clearly struggled with the footing on that London field, took away some of the burst. He's been otherwise actually pretty good this year. So I don't see the Vikings making an acquisition there, but the importance of Aaron Jones has much ink has been spilled about the importance of Aaron Jones to the Vikings offense, but stuff has been blocked up really well. Like I said, these duo runs especially, and Aaron Jones has made really good decisions about whether to take that north-south or whether to bounce it outside, as well as which gap to take on zone and stuff. He's made very fast decisions, and sometimes when you decide fast, it's really hard to decide wrong. If you just pick something and go, like, that window is going to be open for a second, right? And Aaron Jones has taken a lot of advantage of that in a way that I don't think Ty Chandler quite can. But if Ty Chandler has to go in for a week or two, it's just a week or two. You limp through it. You that's what backups are for. If you don't trust that guy to go for like a week or two, then he probably shouldn't have been your backup. If you don't trust that guy to go for the rest of the season, right? If this is a season-ending injury, that makes a little bit more sense to maybe go get some more help. If the Vikings did want to go get running back help, it would probably be more like a waiver claim guy that like competes for playing time with Myles Gaskin. Like we're talking about that level of guy. But the other name that has been very much in the wayside, because his practice window is not open, but it is worth chatting about right quick, is Dalton Risner. He was put on IR with a designation to return. So we're not talking about waived injured, right? We're not talking about all of the way that you would handle like an undrafted rookie that gets hurt, right? No, this is designated to return. We want him on the 53. He played backup right guard throughout the parts of camp that he was healthy for. And O'Connell on the podium once said, he's in there. We got these 3 guards we feel great about. Risner's in there to push him. But Risner never got a first team rep. Like he never really got like a true chance to like compete for that job. So to my understanding, he was the backup and maybe he's just there kind of lurking. If somebody plays really, really bad, he was supposed to be there. Now he's hurt. So it's a moot point. But once he is back, perhaps that pressure is back on to somebody like Ed Ingram or somebody like Blake Brandel, who we didn't really know what we were going to get. I think we're pretty happy with what we've gotten out of Blake Brandel so far, but still like that like looming shadow still exists. And for Ed Ingram, it's, again, the duo runs have been very, very good. But do the Vikings continue to run duo if TJ Hockenson is on the field more? He's a good blocker. I think Josh Oliver is a better one. That's kind of what he's in the building for. Do you feel comfortable with TJ Hockenson one-on-one with an edge? I don't feel terrible about it, but I feel better when that's Josh Oliver, but he's not going to be on the field as much. So can you run as much duo? Will the run game continue to still be better? Or will you just have to rely on the pass even more than you already are, in which point, you're exacerbating pass pro issues that Ed Ingram has had. Same with Garrett Bradbury. So I think that's an interesting conundrum of like what you can run, but like what you can run with Hockenson in terms of strong side zone is also a lot more dynamic, and something that Aaron Jones has a lot of experience in. So it's not like, Hawkinson's return becomes subtraction by addition or anything like that. It's just a different shape of things that use different people's skill sets. The reason I'm talking about this is because on the Minnesota Football Party on Thursday morning, Sam Ekstrom brought up the idea of like, he wants Ed Ingram benched for Dalton Risner as soon as possible. And I don't think that, like, for one, I mean, the practice window isn't open, right? So we're waiting for at least that. But I also think that's probably just overreacting to PFF pressure numbers, because what Ed Ingram is doing right now in the run game is bordering on special. Like Ed Ingram is not the guy I want to like cape for reasons that if you Google my name and Ed Ingram will come up. But I wrote a big long article about it when they drafted him. So he's not a guy that I want to like defend, but I'm not going to lie to you. Like, it's amazing what this interior line is doing in the run game. These duo runs are incredible. And I have been advocating for the Vikings to just like spam it a lot and to live in that a little bit more, because they're getting like 8 a pop. Like, it is really insane when they do this. They have to make some choices, right, about what sort of identity they want to bring out when TJ Hockenson is back on the field. But I think that even if you do decide, yeah, you know what, we love this duo stuff, but the run game's the run game. We're going to be, we're going to live through our passing game. We're going to live through passing to TJ Hockenson. Sorry, Ed, you're going to have to, pass pro a little bit more. Well, there are ways to hide a guard that's struggling in pass pro and a center that's struggling in pass pro, and that's to put them in a double team together. Slide away from Christian Darrisaw, which you want to do anyways, because leaving him on an island is a really successful strategy. And, let those two guys cover each other's weaknesses. I think that's a perfectly sustainable thing that most teams will do. Most teams aren't very happy with all 5 of their guys, right? There's somebody that they're not going to like. Most teams are not like super, like we're just loving, thrilled. All 5 guys are great. Probably get 2 or 3 of those O-lines a year. So if you design your protections, and I'm not even talking about chipping, I'm not even talking about using route resources, I'm just talking about what kind of slides you're in and what kind of play calls you use. The point of all of those tools is to deny your opponent the matchup that they want. And the matchup that everybody wants is on Ed Ingram. So if you deny that, Pass all day long. It's fine. I think the clock, if there is one, starts when Reisner gets back in pads and not before. If he's back in pads and he's sitting there, then you go, okay, we got this guy. We feel how we feel about him, but I don't know if the Vikings even feel that good about him or if they're looking at him the same way they look at Dan Feeney. Thanks for being depth, buddy. And that's kind of going to be that. Because the bye week is coming up, though, and the Vikings are not going to play on Sunday, but we're all going to watch football on Sunday, right? If not, whatever game's on your local TV. If not that, then full on like Red Zone, Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, all that stuff. So let's use this moment to take a look at what people think of the league around the Vikings with the betting lines. That'll be next. All of the betting lines we are about to use will be brought to you by FanDuel. Today's episode sponsored by FanDuel, and you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you haven't already started with FanDuel, you can go to FanDuel.com right now and sign up, and you can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet on anything. Vikings plus 1,200 to win the Super Bowl, at least last I checked on FanDuel. So if you want to just drop $5 on that, make your 12-1 if you're going to be happy with it, and collect that if you win. But even if you don't win, you still get $200 in bonus bets just for playing. So go to FanDuel.com and check that out. Get your $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, whether you win or lose, as long as you place a $5 bet right when you sign up on anything. It can be, a live bet in the middle of at halftime of a game. It can be Super Bowl or MVP futures. It can be NFC North Division futures, and it can even just be whatever is spread over under a crazy parlay. I know y'all like to do that. So whatever you find at FanDuel, you can bet it. Get those bonus bets at FanDuel.com. Make every moment more. Every week, we use the FanDuel betting lines to get a sense for what the market, the nation at large, thinks of the Minnesota Vikings. But without a Minnesota Vikings game on Sunday, that means we get to do this, but apply it to the whole league and see exactly what we're dealing with. Welcome to the Over Under. So, on the Over Under, I would like to start with some pretty good news. The Vikings are favored to win the NFC North. For the first time since I've been looking at this, the Vikings are minus 105, more or less 50-50 to win the NFC North. The next one is the Detroit Lions, who are plus 160. Packers and Bears in further behind positions, plus 650, and the Bears are all the way down at plus 1,600. So, slowly but surely, as we check on these every week, we've seen the public buy just a little bit more into the Vikings. After beating the Giants, they didn't really buy into the Vikings at all. After the 49ers, they bought in a little bit, but you could tell the public still was worried. Is it a fluke? Is it real? Did they just beat a weird Niners team that was missing a player? Then you beat the crap out of the Texans and they believe a little more. Packers, Jets. Well, now the Vikings are seen as simply one of the best teams in the NFC. And in fact, NFC Championship odds, the Vikings and Lions are tied at plus 600 for the second most likely team to win the NFC Championship. First most likely is the San Francisco 49ers, which again, we'll start there with our kind of league-wide thing. The public has not given up on the 49ers at all. And I encourage you, a lot of people will hear these betting lines and go, whoa, that's crazy. Who came up with that? That person must be an idiot. So-called experts. I know better than that. And you get the whole the spiel. But understand that these betting lines are heavily influenced by public participation. They're set at whatever the odds makers think is reasonable to start. And then usually, I actually got this information from talking to an odds maker at the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. I did an interview on this very podcast about it. But they, usually the sharps will then smack the heck out of those lines if they're wrong. So the odds makers will do their best, but they're not going to get everything right? So the sharps will smack the heck out of whatever they think is wrong. And then the general public, which is always going to be a lot slower, the sharps are always right on it right when a line drops, because that's going to be when it's the most inaccurate. But for, average Joes like you and me, it is the wisdom of crowds, sort of. So if you think that it's crazy that the 3-3 49ers are still there plus 360 to win the NFC, if you think that that is insane, that they are fully, 240 points above the next team, which is a tie between the Vikings and Lions, then you just disagree with the public. Like, understand that that's where your take is. And that's perfectly valid. And if you disagree with the public and you want to go to FanDuel.com and put $5 on it and get your bonus bets and potentially, if the Vikings go to the Super Bowl, win 6-1 on that money, by all means, right? Put your money where your mouth is. That's kind of what I always say is, all right, if you don't like it, bet it. Because that's exactly the challenge here. Elsewhere in the NFC, the Eagles are the only team that I think the betting market has any remote confidence in. They're the only other team with shorter odds than plus 1,000 or 10-1 to win the NFC. They're at plus 650. So it's sort of the Niners and then the Vikings, Lions, and Eagles to win the NFC. And then you have a couple other teams that are seen as sort of the long shots or maybe the sort of wild card spicy ones, Packers, Falcons, Cowboys, Commanders. And then it starts to get to anybody I didn't mention there, the book pretty much sees as a strong underdog. What's interesting is that Super Bowl odds don't follow the same pattern quite exactly. They don't have the Vikings and Lions tied. The Lions are actually still above the Vikings in Super Bowl odds. They're plus 1,100 with the Vikings plus 1,200. And so what that tells me is that people who bet on the NFC sees those two teams at equal. People who bet on the league as a whole are still looking at the Lions as a little bit better. And so what I would anticipate is that Super Bowl odds are influenced a little bit more by like league-wide people that maybe aren't paying as much attention to the Vikings. But the Vikings are, fairly comfortable division favorites, right? Like they're clear division favorites right now. They're tied with the Lions in conference odd and behind the Lions in Super Bowl odds. So the closer attention you are paying to the division, the higher you are on the Vikings, the lower you are on the Lions. That is what I am learning about how the public feels. The more attention you pay to the Vikings, the better you feel about them. And boy, doesn't that make sense, right? Because if you're just, if you pay as much attention to the Vikings as I, a Vikings fan, am paying to the Cincinnati Bengals. I know they're 1-4. I know they've kind of had a rough start. I know that they've done that in the past and that they kind of we're supposed to be a lot better than this. And so I'm not really looking at them as like a floundering bad team yet. But I'm going to guess that if I go to the division odds of the AFC North, they're going to be pretty distant long shots, plus 750. Yeah, I'm correct. And if I go to conference odds, well, they're a little higher. They're the sixth highest team to win the conference still because people still believe in them. So I think my theory is a little bit confirmed. The less attention you pay, the lower you're going to be on the Vikings. The more attention you pay, the higher you're going to be on the Vikings. That's probably bodes well for the Vikings. But of course, as we head into this bye week, the Vikings are still a long way away from reaching the true elite great, inarguable greatness that matches the statistical output that they have put out so far. You cannot argue with their start. They are 5-0 and they are as convincing a 5-0 as you will ever see in the league. You blew out a bunch of teams. You had a couple of games that had backdoor covers. You had one game that actually felt a little spicy at the end, and it was in London, big equalizer, crazy turf. It doesn't get more convincing than that unless you're like the Chiefs. And guess what? The Chiefs don't even have a more convincing 5-0 right now. It's the most convincing start in the league. Best start in the league. I don't really see anybody arguing with that. The question has to be whether they can keep doing it. But what I've said a lot, and I'll leave you with this for the weekend, okay? Chew on this. What I said for the last several years, especially when it came to Kirk Cousins, can he win the Super Bowl? That question. The ultimate goal. How do you win the Super Bowl? You got to win 4 games in a row against good teams. You got to win 4 tough games in a row because you got to go to the playoffs. Or you got to be a 1 seed and then it's 3 games in a row. But you probably have to have won 4 games in a row to get that 1 seed. So at some point, you got to win 4 games in a row. And my thing was always that, he couldn't go 4 games without having some kind of stinker. there was always that consistency issue. Which Kirk Cousins are you going to get? Made a whole chaos meter about it, and that was the deal. Well, guess what the Vikings did? They won 4 tough games in a row. They did it. You take the Giants game out, right? And you say, well, that one, it didn't have a playoff vibe. San Francisco game had a playoff vibe. Houston game didn't have a playoff vibe because they killed a team that should be a playoff team. By the way, those Houston Texans are 4th overall in Super Bowl odds, tied with the Lions and Bills at plus 1,100. Vikings took those guys to the woodshed. The Packers game absolutely had a playoff vibe. And you scream out to a lead, but the Packers were so motivated, they did that comeback effort, and the Jets were no slouch either. You put those teams in opposite order, right? Where like a wild card weird one against the Jets, divisional games against the Packers, perhaps you meet the Packers in the divisional round, NFC Championship against the 49ers, Super Bowl against the Texans. That feels like a slate of teams you could absolutely see on a Super Bowl run. And the Vikings won 4 in a row. They proved that they could do it. Can they do it again? Great question. If we knew that, Vegas wouldn't make any money. But that's something that the Vikings of the last few years, and the Vikings, the super fraudulent, like 2016 teams, well, that wasn't a convincing 5-0. In fact, there were signs all over the place. It was the big discourse of like, well, eventually they're going to stop getting these defensive touchdowns. So you can't argue with the 5-0 start. And the Vikings have shown the capability to do what you're going to have to do again to win the Super Bowl, which is win 4 tough games in a row. But the fact that they've already done it once makes me feel like if they can continue to sustain this level of play, which ain't no gimme, sky's the limit. I'll leave you with that. I'll see you on Monday. And as always, Skol.